Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 356 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. So glad to have you with us this week. Megan will be joining us again next week, but today I'm doing solo duty. So what we're going to do is to talk a little bit about some of the bar results that came out earlier this week, both in Texas and New York, two very large jurisdictions. We'll do a little bit of analysis right now, give you the first cut, I'll tell you a little bit about the numbers and what we see there and what we think the implications are of those numbers. Now, we're still waiting for bar results in California and Georgia and a number of other UBE states, and we will keep you up to date on all of that. After I talk a little bit about these results in New York and Texas, we want to share a very special interview that we just conducted. And it's a great interview with a student who took and passed the Florida bar exam. She's got a wonderful story, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's a very powerful discussion of what it means to just not give up, even when you're really discouraged. And as weird as the Florida bar exam was, and every bar exam was in 2020, we've got a great story to talk about February 2021. So I hope you'll stick around for that interview. If this is your first time on the podcast with us, I do want to welcome you. We come to you every week to talk about all things bar exam related, and we offer some insight and details and analysis, but also some great stories about successful bar exam takers. So I hope you'll stick around. We do these podcasts in both video and audio format. If you'd like to watch today's podcast, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/356. That's the episode number. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can do that in a number of different places. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio. We are on Spotify. We're on Amazon Podcasts. Really a lot of places where podcasts are syndicated. So make sure you check those out as well. All right. I do want to jump into these results because it was a big week for results. And early in the week, we got some numbers first from Texas. Now, Texas is a different circumstance in that they switched this year to the uniform bar exam. Up until the February of 2021 exam, Texas gave a state-specific exam. Now they're giving the standard two-day UBE. They did that in February 2021 for the very first time. We had anticipated that the February 2021 exams would be much smaller in terms of the number of people taking the exam. And in both Texas and New York, that turned out to be absolutely the case. We also presumed that pass rates would probably go up because of this change and shift in the number of people taking the test. That also appeared to be the case. Now, in Texas, the overall pass rate for the exam was 61%. There were just over 1,000 total bar takers. And those numbers are interesting. The last statistics really that we have, official statistics, come from 2019. And in 2019, before we went into pandemic craziness, we had for the February bar exam in Texas about 700 repeat bar takers. On this exam, we only had 389. So you can see there's a big drop in the repeaters. And then in the first-time takers, there were 500 bar takers in 2019. There were actually 624 in this exam. So we had a few more first-time takers and considerably fewer repeat bar takers. The pass rate for repeat bar takers in Texas in February of 2021 was 47%. That's significant, I think, to just keep in mind where we are looking at how those results are coming out. That's a relatively high pass rate for repeat bar takers, certainly higher than Texas had in 2020. And the reason we think is twofold. First, they switched to the UBE, and that's just simply an easier test than the old Texas bar exam. It's shorter, didn't have the Texas-specific subjects like procedure and evidence or oil and gas and some other things. And so I think that definitely made a difference. In terms of how the repeat bar takers did, Texas law school repeaters did better, as you might imagine, than out-of-staters. We also had some individuals who were foreign-trained attorneys, and foreign-trained attorneys on the whole, first-time takers, had about a 33% pass rate. That's about average for foreign-trained attorneys in most jurisdictions, but repeat foreign-trained attorneys were only at 19%. you can see that there's a pretty big drop off. When we look at the Texas Law School grads, first-time takers were at 76% pass rate, repeaters were at 54. So you can get a sense relatively of what all of that means. And again, for repeat bar takers in Texas, this was a better exam than they have been. We think that this is a reflection primarily of the UBE, but also of the number of bar takers that you've got. There's just fewer people in that circumstance, and we think that made a big difference. So that's the Texas results at this point. Texas currently is still looking at an in-person exam for July of 2021. I'm still not entirely convinced it's going to happen that way, but that is what they're doing. They've set up 6 sites around the state of Texas for the exam, and they have a special window for those who were unsuccessful in February to reapply and get into that exam. If you've been thinking about the UBE and you want to take it in person, Texas might be a good state to do it in. It's certainly a large state, but there are a lot of testing centers, as I said. And of course, a UBE score is portable to any jurisdiction, unless you're a foreign trained attorney, and then you're limited to just a few states. So we know that a lot of foreign trained attorneys were going to Texas because the New York exam was not open to them. As you're going to hear in a moment, New York has reopened their test to foreign trained attorneys. And so I suspect we'll see a lot of shifting between those two jurisdictions. But in general, that's what we know about the test in Texas. Love to see the UBE, love to have people be able to make their scores portable, and congratulations to everyone who passed that exam. If you were a student who took the Texas bar, the UBE, and you were not successful, we hope you'll reach out and contact us. We've got to talk to you about what you can do differently to make that exam your last exam, which also happens to surprisingly be the name of a webinar that we've got. Do something different, make the next bar exam your last bar exam. We'll link to that in our show notes so you can check that out. The next state that we want to talk about, obviously, is the big state of New York. They released their results this week as well. And one of the amazing things here, and certainly the headline piece in most of the media, is that the bar exam pass rate jumped up by 9%. And that's obviously good news, but I think you have to look at it with a little bit more eye towards the detail. There were only 2,100 candidates that actually sat for the exam in New York in this particular test. Now, if we're going to put that into context, I think we want to again go back into 2019. If we look at the number of bar takers in 2019, we had 2,600 repeat takers only in February, along with another nearly 1,500 first-time takers. So you can see the exam was dramatically smaller, and the number of repeat takers alone was more than all of the candidates that there were. Now, what happened here? The New York bar examiners limited who could sit for the exam, and they only allowed people who had taken the exam twice or were first-time takers, and they restricted out-of-country foreign-trained attorneys to those with LLMs from U.S. accredited law schools. So what happened was we ended up with a very different selection of people taking the exam. That's what caused the pass rate to jump up. When we look at the numbers in New York, of those 2,130 candidates, 1,054 passed. That was an overall pass rate of 49%. As I said, that's a 9% increase from February of 2020, and it's the highest overall passing rate for a February exam since 2013. That's good news, but 1,095, more than half of those numbers were first-time takers, and 698 of the first-time takers passed. So they had a 64% pass rate, up from 61% last year. The repeat takers, and remember, this is a small group of repeaters because they only could have taken the exam twice in order to qualify for this test. They went to a 34% pass rate, and there were 1,035 repeat bar takers. So 48% of the number. That is a much smaller number than we would have had in previous years. So while their results are up, it's a much smaller group of people, and a group of people that did not include these repeat takers with 3 or more attempts. And then the third group we really want to talk about and call out specifically would be foreign educated candidates. This was still a pretty large group of the test. There were 857 foreign educated candidates. That's 40% of the entire exam. And the pass rate for all foreign trained attorneys was 43%. That's up from 31% last year. Now, before you get too excited about it, you've got to understand that we only allowed a very small number of foreign attorneys to sit for the exam. And so that's a big part of the reason that that number jumped up. If you're a first-time taker and you're foreign educated, the pass rate was 52%. If you are foreign educated as a first-timer and a repeater, that pass rate was 43%. So you can see that foreign educated applicants had a lower pass rate, certainly when they were repeaters. The overall repeat pass rate was 34%. So for all categories together, all repeaters were 34%. And that is typical of what we would see in a New York bar exam. If we go back to 2019, our repeater pass rate was 36%. And so we're staying pretty close to that. So that's where we are in New York. What happens now? New York took the restrictions off for the July 2021 exam. And so instead of having 2,000 candidates, they're going to take up to 10,000 candidates in July. They are now allowing people with more than 2 attempts on the exam to sit for the test. They're also allowing foreign trained attorneys to sit for the exam as long as they are qualified, but they no longer need just the ABA accredited LLM. So big difference in the composition of who's taking the test in July. We suspect that will make a difference in the pass rates as well. So when you hear about these numbers in New York, I think you want to be skeptical of what they mean. If you cut down the number of bar takers to the people who should pass on the first try, you're going to see a difference in results. So I'm not sure we can pat the New York examiners on the back quite all that much and say what a great job they did and how open the bar exam is. It certainly was not that. If you took the exam in February of 2021 and passed, again, congratulations, it's great news. If you did not pass, then we certainly understand that. We think you ought to jump into the July exam. We're still in a window in which you can apply. And as I checked before we went to air today, there are still opportunities to apply for the New York exam for July of 2021. So make sure you get on that right away. I think that gives you at least a brief overview of where we think we are today in the process of these results. Again, New York, Texas, 2 very large states in the UBE, and pass rates are better, but there are reasons behind both of them. Now, we're still waiting on a number of UBE jurisdictions to release results. We expect those over the next couple of weeks. Typically, the end of April, the beginning of May is the heaviest season for bar results. Because we had fewer people taking the exam, we're getting results a little bit faster than we normally do, and that's good news, since it gives you a bit more time if you were not successful to get ready for the July test. So next week we'll be back and we'll update you on what's going on there. We'll also update you on any jurisdictions that have announced an online test for July of 2021. You can always check that out on the National Conference of Bar Examiners website. We'll link to that in the show notes, and they keep up to date with what jurisdictions are announcing online tests. All right. I think that's the news. Harder to do without Megan here, but I wanted to get all that out to you today. And of course, as always, that information breaks just as we're about to do our broadcast. So there you go. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to share with you an interview we did earlier this week with a successful Florida bar taker. I think that you'll find Aubrey's story really very encouraging, very inspiring. She's got some great insights about what helped her to be successful. And unlike a lot of our students, Aubrey is someone who had graduated from law school fairly recently. Her first time taking the exam was in 2020, in that weird extended period that ended up with an unusual Florida bar exam in October of 2020. And she was really discouraged when she didn't pass. But I think you'll find that what she did, the way she picked herself back up, went after it, what she did to prepare for February 2021, and the great success she had in raising her score by over 20 points is a real encouragement. So I'd love to have you stay with us and listen to this interview that we did with a successful bar taker. Let's jump into our call. And today we have a new successful Florida applicant. Aubrey, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Well, I'm doing very well, but I bet that this must be just an incredibly exciting week that you've had since results came out.
It's definitely been a week for celebrations, for sure.
Well, I like that, a week for celebration. We have to use that. Why don't you tell your story, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you came to be taking the Florida exam in February of 2021.
Yes. So I was pretty much a typical law student. I went right from undergrad into law school. I went to law school here in Florida. And the bar exam was obviously one of those big things that I had some anxiety about, I would say, throughout law school. And I just recently graduated last year during the height of COVID and everything going on. And we had no idea, none of us in Florida had any idea how crazy it was all going to turn out to be. We imagined maybe it would get postponed once. Maybe that would be the worst that would happen. And it ended up getting postponed twice. And it was a really hard process. And it was the craziness too with the whole exam itself ended up changing the format and everything. And didn't feel great after I took it. And there was the craziness with the online stuff for the first time, all of that. And then we got the results back and found out I did not pass. And it was very hard. There was about a month where I wasn't sure if I was going to take it again. I really wasn't sure where I was going to go from there. And then I was working remotely for my mom's an attorney as well. And she was so supportive throughout everything. But I actually heard from a different attorney on our staff about your bar review course. And he really pushed me to take it again. And I'm happy I did, because I just found out, I think exactly a week ago, that I passed with quite a few extra points, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, you had a great result. I want to go back, and it's awesome that you recentered and went for it. I think people don't necessarily know how incredibly traumatic it was in Florida, where the exam, as you say, was postponed twice in the fall of 2020 and then turned into this odd one-day test with no multi-state in it. And it just kept getting changed and changed. And that second postponement came less than 3 days before the bar exam was supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. So it probably felt to you like you were just studying forever. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. And a part of me thought, if I can't pass with having had that much time to study, maybe I'll never be able to pass. But it wasn't. It's so much more about, just for me at least, it was a lot about where my headspace was at. And that stopping and going with all the delays was just, I think it was a lot for a lot of people, but especially for me, that was the tough part.
Yeah, I think it really was. And then one of the additional challenges was that because the results came out late in the year and you took some extra time, you came to us relatively late in the process, right?
Yep. And I was very nervous about that as well. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to catch up, but I think it was almost a blessing that they came out as late as they did, because then I just kind of got right back into things. And it wasn't as hard to get back into studying as maybe it would be if I had more time off.
Yeah, I think that might be true. You're in that mode anyway. And once you had made the mental decision to jump into the next exam, then you were all in. You weren't dragging your feet. You really went in at full blast.
Yep. And I will say, after I found out I didn't pass the first time, I laid very low. I only told a few people, my people that are very close, obviously my roommates. Everybody that's very close to me knew, but I definitely just did a lot of focused on myself and focused on the work, and not as much about all the outside. What happens if I don't pass? Because that already happened. And that's the worst thing that could happen. So that wasn't a big thing hanging over me this time around.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal, because when you're carrying that load of expectations and what are people going to say and what does this mean for me as a human being, that's a lot of burden to carry, isn't it?
Yep, it's tough.
Yeah, it's very tough. So you found our course, you and I talked, and you decided to jump in, and you chose our basic course. And a question that I get from people a lot is, do I have to get the most expensive courses to pass the bar exam? The answer is
no. Your materials are very sufficient and it's a very well-run course.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the differences you saw in the way that we approached the exam and that you took and prepared versus what you did the first time through. And recognizing, of course, that fall exam was so bizarre that it certainly made things different anyway. But what did you see? What stood out in your mind as being different about this approach?
So something that was hard for me as I was going through studying the first time around with my big box bar review, I think that's what you guys call them. Yeah. So many materials, just so much to go through, 4 different outlines for one subject. And you have to, and it's just a waste of time going through all that when you try to go through everything and make your own mini outline at the same time. And that was just so time consuming, and looking back, a waste of time for me. And I think the big difference also with your course is it just teaches you how to apply what you've learned a lot better than I think I noticed with the big box bar review. Big box bar review is more, here's all the material, memorize this. And that was the first time, your course was the first time I ever heard somebody say, don't memorize.
Yeah, it's
And
stunning, isn't it? Like, what are
yeah,
wrong with these people? And yet you knew the material, didn't you, when you got into the exam?
yeah, it was crazy how confident I felt, especially the essays. Also, your writing, like little videos, are probably the most helpful. That was probably the most helpful part for me.
Yeah, and for people that don't know, one of the things that we teach differently, instead of issue spotting, which is what you did in law school and what most bar reviews teach, we try to have you write about the conflicts or the disputes and then use the laws and reach conclusions. And that's a little different at first, isn't it?
A little bit, but it helps you so much with time management and organization that I just don't know how nobody had ever come out with that before, because it was so helpful.
That's great. And I remember talking to you before the exam, and you felt pretty confident about your writing at that point. You felt like you understood what you needed to do, right?
Yep. And it was, I think that was the essay writing workshop is one of the first videos you have people watch. And I was like, why did nobody tell me this beforehand? Because it just breaks it down in such a way that is so much more manageable for these exams, especially for Florida exams.
That's great. What about the multi-state? People, obviously, you didn't have the multi-state in the fall, so you didn't really know where you were going to be with that preparation. What was the multi-state exam like for you? I
actually didn't feel as confident about the multi-state than I did with Florida. Luckily, I passed both parts, but I definitely felt it's that second day and just having to really push yourself through at the end. That was hard for me, I felt, but I definitely felt like your materials and those practice exams especially had me more confident going into it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about taking an exam online, because obviously that's one of the big uncertainties for people. There are some jurisdictions that are in person, some are online. Florida currently is giving the test in an online format. What did you think about taking the test? Did you take it from your home or did you go somewhere else to take it online?
I took it from my home. And I will say, because I took it that October beforehand online, I wasn't as stressed about it going into the second time because I had experienced everything already and everything went well for me. Luckily, thankfully, both times. But I preferred it because it is nice being able to roll out of your bed and go take the exam and I really believe that other people's stress you can feel in that room. And
yes, absolutely.
That's something I'm thankful I did not have to go through, and everything, the Wi-Fi, everything worked out well for me. So I am a proponent of the online exam.
So did you kick your roommates out for 2 days?
Actually did not. One of them worked outside actually, and the other was so quiet in her room and I didn't even notice any of them were there. And I think when you get in such a headspace too, you zone everything else out.
Yeah, I think so. And it's not that you have to be in a library to take the test. You can do it from your home or your apartment or wherever. The advantage of being able to roll out of bed and eat your meals in your own kitchen and frankly, just use your own bathroom and not have to be in a room with 3,000 or 4,000 people, I think is a huge advantage. So plus not having to travel and stay in the hotel and all those things. Yeah. And the technology worked okay for you, your exam.
Everything was, and that was also the same technology we would use during law school for online essay exams. So I was pretty familiar with it already.
That's great. Now, when you sat for the exam, you've been through the weird October test. Now you're taking a full-length 2-day exam. And it is different. That second day is just physically and mentally wearing, isn't it? To grind you down a little bit. How did you feel when the exam was all over?
Relieved, obviously. I would say I felt better than I did the first time. Like I knew that I had done something was different, that I felt more confident. I was still, obviously the waiting period was not easy, but I was pretty confident that I had passed. Yeah. Which I was not the first time around.
Exactly. Now there's about a 6-week waiting period in Florida after the results come out. And then a week ago today, Florida had their usual portal breakdown and everything went crazy and people couldn't get on. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of seeing your results when you finally were able to get online?
I don't think my heart has ever beat so fast in my life. Honestly, it was I woke up. I remember I woke up at 8 a.m. because they usually release them pretty early and they hadn't released it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to bed. Somehow fell back asleep and then woke up around 10 or 11 and checked, and they had released the school numbers, you know how they do that first. And I went to FSU Law and only 9 people took it from our college, which was crazy. And then I saw 7 passed and I was like, if I am not a part of that 7, I will be shocked. And I went on and everything loaded and I saw my score and the congratulations, and it was the best feeling in the world. I think I screamed. I did scream, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And then you called your mom.
Yes. First person I called.
Right. And what did she have to say?
She was, first of all, actually, I was crying a little bit, I think. And she was like, it's okay, it's fine. I was like, no, I passed. And she was like, you can't call me crying, making me think something bad happened. But she was so happy, but she was very confident, if not more confident than me, that this time around I did pass.
Yeah, you had put in the work and it was pretty clear that you were going to be successful. You had the right attitude. You were doing all the steps that you needed to do. And I can say, as a parent of a bar taker many years ago, it is stressful as the parent to watch Absolutely. That. You're like, I can only imagine what an exciting moment that was for her and for you to be able to share that with her. What advice would you give people who are perhaps in a situation similar to yours, where they've taken the exam, maybe they got their February results and they were unsuccessful, and now they're feeling all those sorts of emotions that you felt after the fall?
I would say, and I actually got this from one of your first videos I watched, is just, it doesn't mean anything about your intelligence or your capability, because it's just how you were on one day. And it's with going forward, you have to realize you may have just had a bad day or 2 days if you took a 2-day exam, but you can't take that energy. I don't think you can take that energy or negativity go if you want to go forward and take it again. I think you have to, and it's not easy. It takes a lot, but I think you have to go in with a fresh mindset and just say, this time I'm going to pass. And that was something that I did throughout my weeks of studying. Was every day, if I had like a moment of self-doubt, I just had to tell myself, no, I'm going to pass.
I think that's really important to do. The mindset is as important as the substantive knowledge, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing your story with our audience. I know that there are a lot of people out there who did get their results. The repeat bar taker pass rate in Florida was about 10%. So you really beat the odds substantially, but a lot of people are feeling that discouragement. I think for a lot of folks, sometimes it's a sense of just feeling like they should give up. How would you explain to that person that feels like giving up what it feels like when you do pass? Does it make it worthwhile to have pushed through? You were at that point after the earlier exam where you weren't sure you wanted to keep going. What do you say to that person?
I say you just have, first of all, look at your bar review course. And that is step number 1. And then just also be confident in yourself that no matter what obstacles life throws at you, and I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but they're all happening for a reason. And I think that first time around, as terrible as it was to go through, it made it all so much better in the end. And that first time, as hard as it was to find out that I didn't pass, it made it so much better the second time around when I did. And just knowing that I could get through something like that, and just gives you a whole new confidence in yourself.
Yeah, I imagine it gives you great confidence. You should be very confident at this point. And it's exciting to be thinking about starting your legal career, isn't it?
Finally, yes, it is very exciting.
You go through undergrad, you go through law school, you go through the whole bar exam process, and now finally you get to do what you wanted to do. And I'm excited to see what you do as a member of the bar. I think it's going to be great to have you in the Florida bar. I'm very excited for you and just feel terrific about your success. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story. I know it will encourage a lot of people. Any last thoughts you want to share with our audience before we sign off today?
Again, my biggest thing was just having that confidence every day throughout studying. And when you do have those moments of self-doubt, you just got to pull yourself out of them. And it's easier said than done, but it helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Aubrey, we're just really excited for you, proud of you. Thank you so much for sharing and forward to just seeing the cool stuff that you do. I hope you'll stick around and continue to stay part of our community. And just it's great news and very excited. So thank you for being here. Thank you to our audience for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And we will see you again next time when we talk to another successful bar taker. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
That's our episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Aubrey. We wish her all the best. We have more interviews coming with successful bar takers in the UBE and Florida and lots of jurisdictions. And I think you're going to love to hear those. So stay tuned for those in upcoming episodes. Again, we'll be back to you next week. We'll update you on everything that's going on. We hope that everyone is doing well, staying healthy, and continuing to move forward to the July 2021 exams and beyond. And we will see all of you next week along the Extra Mile.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.